Welcome to Clapback with the Facts podcast, where we are providing you with the information you need to know about what's politically impacting Black women across the country. In a world filled with mis and disinformation, we provide you with the real. If you're a Black woman, representing Black women, or in the community with Black women, we are here to clap back and give you the facts. Thank you for joining episode 21, Reaction to the Fearless Fund Decision, the Status of Black Women's Economic Justice, with special guest Shila, Burney, General Partner at Zane Venture Fund. We will be sharing the facts and dropping gems, so let's get ready to clap back with the facts.
Hello. So excited to be with you here today. Man, I can just say, we have had some amazing shows in our history, in our short history. We were excited when we made it to 10. I don't know what we're going to do when we make it to 30. It's going to be off the chain. Today, we are excited to talk about one of my favorite subjects, and that is the economic empowerment of Black women. We have an amazing guest here to give us the real about all the things that are impacting our economic justice. I think we're going to explore some new ways to think about Black women's economic justice. But before we get into that, I don't do this by myself. I'm not going to show up here by myself. I got to bring at least one sister with me. And today, that sister is Simone Henderson. Hey, girl. Hey.
Hey, y'all. How y'all doing?
We are doing amazing. So, money, Black women, justice. I don't even know if there is anything better than those three concepts.
That sounds like
And
a perfect trifecta.
have brought an amazing guest to have this conversation with us today. Before we bring her up, just level setting, you all have, hopefully, if you are long-term podcast members, have heard us talk about where we have set with the Fearless Fund. You may know or have read about the lawsuit against them by antagonist Edward Bloom. And you may also know that a few weeks ago that decision, that case was ended based on a mutual settlement between the two that was reached last month in December. Today, Simone has brought a very special guest with us to think about the impact of that settlement and, frankly, the lawsuit in general, but more importantly, to talk about the future of Black women's economic justice and power in this country. So, Simone, since this was definitely something that you curated, please introduce our guest and bring her to the stage.
Absolutely. So I was very honored to meet and Miss Shila Nieves Burney. She is the managing partner of Zane Venture Fund. And after many of our conversations and hearing about the work that she does and the company itself, thought there was no better platform or space for us to discuss her work and what perfect timing with this settlement being reached. So I would love to introduce Ms. Shila Nieves Burney with us this afternoon.
Hi, Shila. Welcome to Clapback, Get the Facts. We're so excited to have you.
I am so excited to be here, and I can't wait to dive into this very important and critical conversation that we're going to have.
Oh, critical, I think, is the operative word here. It is critical. And, part of this is we want to make sure that we are equipping Black women and all of our listeners with the tools that they need to be more in control of their economic power. But before we get into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about your work at Zane Ventures?
Sure. So, and I'll give you a little bit of my background because it ties directly into the work I'm doing now. So I spent about 20 plus years investing in what I call human capital through programs and services. So think large institutions like the American Cancer Society, the public school system in Florida. And so my work has always been centered around how can we create programs and services for marginalized communities. And so did that, pivoted to full-time entrepreneurship in 2018 and decided I wanted to start a whole other different business, but an entrepreneur asked me to help him source capital. And I'm like, what does that even mean? Well, I knew I had to do a bit of research in venture capital. It was building a tech platform based in Cote d'Ivoire in Africa and it was a blockchain. I didn't even know what blockchain meant at the time. And so he needed some capital. And I said, okay, well, one thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to try to do my best to help folks, right? That's just my mantra in life. Let me
Yeah.
help you. Did that for 9 months, got so educated on mainly the inequities within venture capital and decided to do something about it. I was able to get this young man to a $5 million letter of intent, and then the investor decided to drop out and invest in hotels. And I said,
Wow.
that's a problem for me. So I decided to first, let me go get educated around venture capital. Let me find out where the money is. Let me find out who the players are, build a network. And then, let me start forming what looks like what could be a fund. Along the
Mhm.
way, I met so many incredible entrepreneurs in different cities across the country and decided, well, first of all, let me help provide them some resources. I don't have capital right now, but let me at least provide some resources. So we
Mhm.
did that through just meetups in different cities. Had about 1,200 entrepreneurs in my database and said, like, this is so crazy. I got all these entrepreneurs, but I don't have a vehicle to get them capital. And that's
Wow.
where Zane Venture Fund was born. And so we launched that fund in late 2019. Of course, we know what happened in 2020, but we really believe we had a thesis around investing in underrepresented entrepreneurs. Was not only just good for the country, but it was just good. It's just smart business. And so we
Yeah.
launched the fund, first fund. We didn't have a real thesis around sector. Just really wanted to prove that thesis out around underrepresented. So meaning Black. Latin communities, women, those sort of entrepreneurs. And so did that. We just a small proof of a concept fund, under $3 million, made 9 investments. And now we're working with those companies. So we proved everything that we wanted to do. Primarily those companies was from the Southeast because this is one of the most poorest areas of the country. And my goal is to be committed to doing as much as I can to get this community whole. And so
Yeah.
fast forward, we're launching our next fund where we're going to focus on at the intersection of the social determinants of health and technology, using innovation to promote health equity and economic inclusion. And so that is where we are now with our fund. I'm what is called solo GP, meaning I do this work primarily by myself, but I have venture partners that help me source deals and that sort of stuff. But
Mhm.
this is my way of creating economic justice. Is
I
through a
love
venture
it.
fund.
I love this. And it feels like we haven't provided this context yet, but in so many ways, it feels like where you started is actually where it seems that the settlement and the Court with Fearless Fund ended up anyway.
Isn't that
Um,
interesting?
and then, so I find that to be absolutely fascinating.
Mhm.
And it really is sitting at the intersection of the underrepresentation piece, but layering it with some practicalities and problem solving that we see in our society. And I'm really excited, and we're going to talk more in just a minute about your new fund that you have coming up. But do want to, Simone, go ahead and jump in here. I know you have a lot of questions in terms of the reaction to the Fearless Fund.
Oh, absolutely. And just like Holly hit on, the work that you do and that inspired the company and at its very inception is what was under attack in the Fearless Fund lawsuit. And so when it first came about, I can only imagine what your reaction was. And then now hearing the settlement. So once you heard the lawsuit was underway, what kind of steps did you take? Or did you take any at all to say, I'm not just going to sit by and just seize what happened. I'm going to and see what happens. I'm going to be a part of it.
So there's this saying, to know me is to love me, meaning I am going to be 100% Shila. And so I don't know how to sit back and see something happening and go, oh, that is so interesting. I'm glad it's not me. I took
Mm,
media and I said, it's time to get the cavalry going because we don't know if I'm going to be next or you're going to be next.
right.
Several of us had the same focus. We wanted to solve this gap as much as we can around the access to capital for underrepresented entrepreneurs. Everybody had a certain thesis. The Fearless Fund was focused on women of color, right? And so seeing that, I made that post and then I went to work. Okay, so who do I need to be talking to? First of all, I have a similar thesis, or are they going to come after me? So I'm going to talk to my attorney. That's the first thing I did. I talked to my attorney. They reviewed everything and told us some things that, this may cause some interest from, a lawsuit like this guy right here. So you may want to tweak some things. You don't have to change your mission. You just have to understand you can, something, they may come after you. Fine. But I'm not going to change the work I'm doing. I decided that right away. For a split second, there was this fear. And then it was like, well, let's get to work. So I am a part of this women group of general partners across the country. It's not that many of us Black women who run funds. And so I immediately say, like, what do we do? We were already going to meet in Martha's Vineyard anyway for a gathering. And so we said we would use that gathering to talk about the Fearless Fund. And so that gathering was in August of 2022. And we decided, was that 23? I think not 23. Yes, when the lawsuit came out. And so so I got this group of maybe 50 to 75 women together and said, I want us to do something. This is not the time to talk about how we network in DC on this day. We want to talk about how do we support and back the Fearless Fund. And so we explored different ways on how we could do this. And then we decided the first thing that we can do that was quick was to put out a letter of support, sort of like get these people to sign on quickly. So there was an article in Forbes where 70 plus of us signed on saying we back the Fearless Fund. They have our full support. So that was the first thing to do. Get the story in the media, let them know that we're not running scared from this particular cause. We're going to back their Fearless Fund as much as we can. So that was the very first thing I did. And I wanted to make sure somehow they knew that they were being supported by their community, right? All of us are very small funds. We don't have the capability of really having this kind of lawsuit happen. We don't have the funding to take care. So we knew it was going to be a hit. So we were like, okay, the next thing is we need to fundraise. We need to find out who has the capability and the capital to help them fight this case. So there were several very wealthy white men who reached out to me. And at first they wanted to, like, let's set up a fund, let's set up whatever these different things. And we were like, well, what's the main things that they're going to need help with their funding. And so as much as we could, we tried to put those people directly in touch with the Fearless Fund. It's not us. They need the money, and let's see what happens. And then at the same time, with we tried to, at some way, elevate I think we were thinking $100 million fund, so that to showcase that there were going to be people who were still interested in Black women, GPs. None of those people followed up after we gave them a proposal. We were not critical to what they were wanting out of this particular thing. And so it was a letdown, but we continue the work. And so we continue to support them on the back end where we don't have to be out front. And so the decision came down. I think I had more of a, and I did post this. I think it was disappointing. And I'm not saying they got to fight to the ends of earth for what is should be rightfully done. But I was really disappointed that it ended that way. Because now what do we do? What in the minds of some of us, it's like, we don't know which way to go. Do we shut down our funds, focus on this group because there was no signal that says you're going to be in trouble, or do we continue because the door was left open?
I have to comment on a couple of things. I think the first thing and one of the most powerful things that I think collectively as a community of people interested in underrepresented businesses and providing them with different levels of access is the collective nature of the response. I think that that made a tremendous difference. I think it helped to protect people and investors who were truly interested in the cause and not just a PR moment. But I think it helped to separate those who were passionate about moving community and, frankly, as you say, our country forward in expansion of economic justice. And I think it provided a lot of opportunity for folks to stand up and say together, this is something that we support.
Right.
And I don't think that that's something that, regardless of how the courts may choose to decide in the future, or other funds that may find themselves in different situation, I hope that one of the things that comes out of this, because it was a settlement and not a judgment, it sort of became a draw in a way. But I hope one of the takeaways is how powerful and how important it is when we see people standing together as a collective. And while the Fearless Fund may have been the quote unquote target for that moment, I think it was made very clear by the support of yourself and others, and frankly, even organizations, institutions, and profiles of people, that this was something that we were not going to let just happen to our community, and that we were prepared to seek a way forward no matter what the courts decided. And I think if we continue to bring that type of hope and optimism to our fight for more economic parity, there's no way we can lose. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you. And 100%. People put their, we put all of our businesses on the line. These are people who are building businesses, the funds from the ground up, using a lot of their time, their own money,
Yeah.
And so you had folks like Arlen Hamilton and Melissa Bradley, stalwarts in the venture community who came out and stood with us, right? Because we're young. So my two partners, and I want to definitely give them a shout out, Tessa Philpott in Chicago and Kim Nixon in LA, who were writers with me on the letter. But we are young in this space, and so we put a lot on the line.
Yes, and you just shouted out Melissa Bradley, one of my personal heroes, who's helped to educate me about how money works in this country, especially from a business sense and from a venture capitalist sense as well. So shout out to her for sure. So I definitely want to move into the status of what's possible now. So we're now post lawsuit for now, and frankly, didn't really get anything definitive from the courts that said this could or couldn't happen, because we did end up in a settlement position. I think that it created more than anything, and the irony is not intentional, fear in the marketplace. And that was about all. Where do we sit now? How can we start to build back that hope and optimism and combat? I guess really what I'm saying, how can we start to combat what the fear that may have been injected into a space that was built on hope and optimism, and ultimately continue to help businesses?
Sure. So it's just not enough to say that we support economic justice, right? We all know that we have to do something. Again, Michelle Obama has already told us that. So we need to make these founders, these funds, support policies that level the playing field and shift capital into the hands of people who are actually solving real problems. The Fearless Fund was solving a real gap in venture capital, right?
Yeah.
Women, or just Black women specifically, don't we receive less than 1% of venture capital. What gift are we shaking with folks where the 99% has no one said, is that a problem right there? And so we have to keep pushing to solve those kind of problems, right? Shift the capitals into the hands of the people who need it, who are actually solving real problems, right? And then we need structural change. So one of the things that was called out today, so most of the venture funds that we're talking about right now are don't come from wealthy backgrounds. We use our own money to start these funds up, which sometimes put us in debt. No, not sometimes. Most of the times will put us in debt. And so there are policies around what do we call, so one of the terms, I don't even call myself a venture capitalist. People think it's sexy. People think it's all about money and parties and getting whatever. My thing is I'm a capital entrepreneur. I go out and look for capital and bridge the gap for other entrepreneurs to receive that capital. And so there needs to be some sort of structural change and some sort of policy that changes who we are. So an entrepreneur starts a business under this new economic policy, opportunity economy policy potential around $50K to startup businesses. Imagine what that can do for me as a venture fund looking to be able to, I got to hire, I have to do the same things that other entrepreneurs need to do. So the Fearless Fund put a lot of effort in setting that fund up and money. And so we need structural changes around how do we, why don't we change some of these definitions that work for community like ours? The venture capital is a dirty word and it's only for the 99%, but what do we have for the 1% who are doing this because we want to solve real problems in communities?
So I have to ask, you're hitting a lot of buttons for me. I gotta tell you, is my brain is just on freaking rotation right here. Because it looks like we have a new administration possibility coming up. This idea of definitions is really, I'm also trained as an attorney, so definitions matter to me for sure. And I have to tell you, This idea of 50,000 is aligned with what we've seen at least one of our presidential candidates talk about in terms of supporting entrepreneurs. Where do we need to see these definitions codified?
In terms, so I don't want to say it's Treasury. I don't know if it's Commerce. You know,
Mm-hmm.
our business is regulated by the SEC, the Securities and
Yep.
Exchange Committee. I don't know if it's that particular group who does that. Most of the rules that come down about governing how we do our work comes from that particular group. So I'm assuming it would be the SEC.
Yeah, it feels like almost looking at an expansion of the Jobs Act that was passed under, I told you I could get geeky with this. The Jobs Act that was passed under the Obama administration to really think about a different class of investors. And so we have the ability now where the investing world has been broken wide open. So it's no longer limited to people who are of the 1%. But you're right; it's like we're missing the second iteration of that
Right.
in order to be able to define it in a way that doesn't also hold them accountable to the same kinds of rules and regulations as the 1%ers.
So
So
that brings
I
me.
like this.
I love that. I love that. And you just suggested the perfect place for it because that's basically how a lot of us got into this because of the
Yeah.
job.
So my
Because
question is based on the expertise. Oh no,
We got excited and geeky on you. Go ahead, Simone.
I was
Help us out, sis. Help us out.
I wanted to continue, but I wanted to ask, just to drill down, do the two of you think that this has to be defined for venture capitalists or capital entrepreneurs to be able to continue their work of investing in communities of color, of investing not just communities of color, but entrepreneurs of color, that can the work continue with or without it being defined?
I think it should be defined. Because if we're defining it by venture capitalists, and if we're going to go with the way venture capital has worked for like the last 50 years, I think it's about a 50 to 60-year-old industry. We can consider pattern matching after that, and we're going to continue to see the same results. Or we can say, well, there's a whole other crop of VCs popping up. They're not like the others. And I'm not saying VCs are bad. I have some great folks, but I'm just saying the industry as a whole has such a negative connotation, right? Especially
You're
now.
not like us. Just
Right.
throwing in a little kindred.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my goodness, yes.
I'm gonna have to use that somewhere. But like, yeah,
Mhm.
100%, because we got in here to solve a problem.
Yeah.
People often ask, why venture capital though? Why didn't you go some other route, CDFI or something like that? Here's the thing. Startups take money in the beginning. They're just ideating sometimes. They don't even know where this is gonna go. And so they don't have 100K or 300 years of returns and all of this stuff that most of these companies who've gotten money from government expect from them, right? Walking into a bank is a non-starter. Even for me as a fund manager, I have not, I don't want to put all my business out there, but I didn't even realize I'm not really, like, I don't have, the way venture is set up, I'm not set up to even buy a house at this point because of one bank. Silicon Valley Bank was structured to do all that kind of stuff, but your regular bank can't do that. Your CDFI is going
That's
to ask
right.
you for this. But startup companies, I have to believe in you. I'm backing you in your idea and probably
That's
some
right.
traction. And so you don't get to do that in any other industry but venture capital. And so that's why I think that's why first of all, it chose me. I didn't choose venture capital. I wanted to help an entrepreneur, and that just happened to be the route. And we've seen how successful it can be, right? It's just that no one participated in us in the successes, and so we have to almost
Yeah,
to create our own success.
I'm not the expert here, but I'm gonna agree with you. Mainly because you are the expert, but also because in my work in terms of, looking at diversity, equity, inclusion, one of the biggest challenges that we have in advancing policy or regulation, or frankly, even culture, is the lack of definition. When
Mm,
people don't understand what it is, they don't know how to support it, help it, and there has been some And some would say they also don't know how to tear it down. But I believe that we're at a place where there's more people who want to support and help, but the
Mhm.
definitions help to provide a safety place for them to be clear about exactly what it is that they're doing, investing in, how those investments work. There's an old adage, um, good rules make good friends, So when you understand exactly what's expected of you, then you know how to best show up. And this being a new model, a new approach, I think the definitions will help to validate not only its success, but the fact that this is an alternative way to invest,
Mhm.
and an alternative way to seek opportunity. And we know that, and in the definition, I would hope that it creates, going back to something that you said a little bit earlier, it creates a way for us to rewrite, reframe, and frankly tear down old structures and build new structures that aren't simply based or entrenched in supremacy language and or culture, that is more inclusive, so that this is being built intentionally to support what we know will help to build out our economy, but a little bit closer to home, build out that wealth that we look for our families for generations. So I think the importance of definition, and you are straight genius for pointing that out and bringing that to our attention, is certainly someplace we need to be. And because I also work at the position of politics, my dog is trying to get up under my laptop. I had to relocate. So my photo is moving all around. Apologies for those of you all who are watching us on YouTube and not just listening to us. Things are happening over here. Uh, but I think that that really does help to give us a way forward. And that's where I kind of want to wrap up and sort of talk about what is the way forward? What are some of the things that you would add that you think need to happen? And I'd like for you to think about it in terms of, our audience represents people who care very much about economic justice. Some of them are, in fact, entrepreneurs. Some of them are idealists who are thinking about entrepreneur, and some of them just simply want to support an economy that works better for all of us. What things do you think help move them ahead? Help give them a place to plant their flag, if you will? What are some of the things, especially as we are in a political climate? What are some of the things they should be listening for as they're making their decision about who's going to lead our country? Not just who, but what direction our country should be going in.
So sure. So one of the things for those of your listeners who are really kind of new, even to entrepreneurship on either side, whether you want to fund entrepreneurs or you want to build something, this is not charity. This is an
Yeah.
investment. So we're looking for returns on our money, and I want folks to kind of understand that that's exactly what the Fearless Fund has always been looking for, right? And so
Yes.
we are proof that we invest in the communities because we see the real returns, whether it's return on community, which I think is so incredibly important. It shouldn't just be return on capital. It should be return on like a better community. We have better schools, we have better housing, we have better roads, something like
Mhm.
that. And I know that's government's responsibility, but there are technology companies who are building these long lasting things that support the entire ecosystem. And one thing that economic justice isn't about just the initial funding, right? So you give someone a check and you say, okay, go build. No, you have to create a continuous ecosystem where founders have success, continuous access to networks, mentorship, policy, and advocacy, right? Who are the people like now, what you were mentioning earlier? We need to have those kind of people in our conversation. So when things need to be tweaked, they can handle it at the policy level. Sometimes we're beating our heads trying to think, who do we talk to? Again, we talked earlier about education. And so one of the things that we did was we built sure, there's one aspect of raising capital and deploying it, but then there's another aspect of what are you going to do with it? So why don't we help you before you get that capital? Here are some things.
Mhm.
So we got to keep that education cycle going. We have to help entrepreneurs find non-dilutive capital that's not with no strings attached, right? I'll give you an example. I just put in my newsletter today. Panasonic has I didn't even know they had a foundational arm, is basically they put out a call for a $1 million non-dilutive prize to entrepreneurs who are building in the well-being space for their community. And so I'm going to share that information. So we have to make sure our founders have this information. And thankfully, I built enough community and network within this venture ecosystem that I get these things early and I can share them right back with my community. And so we have to keep that wheel of knowledge going. Just let's not stop because, oh, they have the capital, they should know everything right now. And it's just, this is a long-term commitment.
Yeah.
This is not just, one and done. We have to continue to build. And I mentioned earlier about how we're trying to build a healthy human economy. And that is by investing in those areas that the social determinants of health and healthy people 2030 have said are getting worse, right?
Mm-hmm.
So while there's always money put towards charity, how about we put some real money to some companies who are solving those problems? So we're focused on housing, education, climate, as in the built environment, right? So housing with pollution in neighborhoods, that sort of thing, food access. And then,
as
of
we
course,
talk about, I was going to say, as we talk about what's around the corner in the years to come, not just this election cycle, but leading into the next 10, 15, 20 years, where will Zane Venture be planting itself? What's next for you all? How are you all investing in the direction of tomorrow?
So we have set ourselves up on this phase 4 plan, right? It's over probably a 10 to 15 year period. But phase 1 is really going after creating this, our fund 2, to invest in those companies who, again, are creating companies at the intersection of the social determinants of health and technology. And so we will be going, I'll tell more about that later in terms of when we go to market, how do we go out and potentially talk to investors soon. But that's where we're going next because we see this is a true problem. I live in zone 4 of the country, the Black Belt of the South. It is one of the most unhealthiest places to live in the country. But we're also one of the most diverse. So how do we bring these diverse communities, underrepresented communities, bring them capital and others resources to solve the problems in their own community, And so that's what we're trying to do next. It's like, how do we go find those companies, invest in them, back them, and get them to scale companies to solve around the issues that I mentioned earlier. And so it's not going to just take my fund is a $50 million fund focused on those entrepreneurs. A $30 million fund focused on those entrepreneurs. That is nothing compared to the size of the problem. It is a $142 billion problem just on like what is just being spent on keeping people healthy, right? Instead of keeping them or whatever, instead of like, let's find other ways around wellness instead of like, pharma pills every time there's something, right? Why don't we have better food and better access, that kind of stuff, to parks and things? And so hopefully this will turn into a, where we're creating a cooperative sort of economic system for everybody and, who is looking to be able to build wealth.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Listen, Shila, thank you so much for dropping by the Clapback, Get the Facts. And I want to say, as we're closing out, I want to remind folks that honestly today, the biggest call to action is to get informed. The biggest call to action is to follow, subscribe to their newsletter, Zane Ventures, get the information so that you are informed and educated about things that you probably don't know a whole lot about. Even those of you who might say, hey, I've been in business. Yeah, but you probably don't understand exactly how to access capital. You may not know how to do it through a venture capitalist, or we're going to say, we're going to be redefining these terms, but through an entrepreneurial capitalist frame. We may need to even come up with some new terms of our own. But we need you to be educated. We need you to be informed. We need you to be part of the solution and defining our own economic future. A big part of what I'm calling everyone who's listening to this to do is to understand the economic policies of the folks who are currently running for elected office. That's not just the president, that's everyone, because it's going to take folks up and down the line in order to create the kind of structure, future, and systems that we need to thrive. And then finally, I want you to take a look at your own economic economy. I want you to think about what you're doing in your own economic space to decide, are you being more of a consumer than an investor? To think about ways that you can be investing in your future, not just for you, but for your family and for those who you haven't even met yet in your family to come. We do this together. And that's my final note here, is that we do this work together. When we work as a collective, we are far better off than we can be individually. And there's a space for you in this economy where you're not just a consumer, where you're not just looking for charity, but where you can empower yourself and your business and other businesses to thrive and solve some of these societal problems at the same time. If Shila hasn't been a complete breath of fresh air, optimism, and hope for what our economy could be, then I don't know who the heck else would be. So I want to make sure that you all are very clear about these opportunities and about what we can do, and especially when we do it together. Shila, thank you so much for being a part of the Clapback. Simone, genius as well. Shout out to you for making this all happen. I want to remind folks that they should like, follow, and subscribe us because, we're going to be talking about all the things, but the one thing you're going to know for sure is that we're going to be preparing you to be able to clap back and get the facts for your best life. All right, that's all for us. Take care.
Thank you for joining us here on Clapback Get the Facts podcast. We hope that you're leaving feeling more informed and ready to provide others with the facts. We would love to hear your biggest takeaways from this episode, so post the show on your Instagram story and tag us at Sisters Lead. Also, if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. And while you're at it, please leave a review so others can get some sense of the facts that we're providing. Finally, if you would like to learn more about local resources and other projects we're working on, go to sistersleadsistersvote.org.